So, good morning, everyone all around the globe who is joining us here today for the kickoff of our Building Sense Now masterclasses. Really happy to welcome you here. My name is Felix Jansen. I am the Director for PR Communications and Marketing at the DGMB, German Sustainable Building Council, and I'm happy to introduce you the two main initiators of the Building Sense Now initiative, being Christine Lemaitre, who is a structural engineer, worked for a few years at the very beginning in the US before moving back to Germany, and she came to the DGMB in 2009. CEO since 2010, has a large influence in bringing the DGMB to become Europe's biggest network in sustainable building, and also making the DGMB certification one of the major certification systems for sustainable buildings and districts in the world. And I'm happy to introduce Prashant Kapoor. He is Chief Industry Specialist at the IFC Climate Business Group from the World Bank Group. He's the one entrepreneur who's behind, or who created the EDGE system, which is been used in over 130 emerging markets today. So he's a real driver for sustainable building all around the globe, especially in those emerging markets. So happy to have you here, the both of you. Prashant, on the Building Sense Now website, you have an introductional text in your motivation behind your activities here. And you say that buildings are so inspirational, they're a beautiful mix of art and science, but buildings can also be frustrating too. What do you mean by that, and why does it lead over to Building Sense Now?
Yeah, the reason I say that it can be beautiful and frustrating at the same time is that, you know, the art of building can be quite spectacular. You know, some of the most wonderful objects that humans have created, you know, is architecture, right? But at the same time, when you walk the central business districts, I'm in Singapore now, I see glass all around me, and you realize that in a tropical place, equatorial, in fact, you know, this is a disaster in terms of the amount of air conditioning you need, and to realize that actually it could have been much better with some few simple changes. You know, things could have been a lot better and a lot more conscious and climatic. That is a bit frustrating to realize that, you know, there is this kind of need to look like something else, something international, you know, when actually the climate should be the driver, and that sort of realization that it's a beautiful object, but it could be unclimatically correct, is a bit frustrating and ironic in a way.
Christine, what was the idea of creating this initiative? Also from those aspects, what were your experiences?
Well, yeah, basically to connect to that, to raise awareness for the points Prashant just mentioned. You know, we see this globalized trend of architecture. We see more and more buildings which are completely detached from its climate and cultural environment. And what we, I think, always forget is that buildings are supposed to be there for many, many years. And so we actually, with buildings, we have the responsibility to include future-proofness. And we cannot just follow trends, because we cannot just demolish everything and then rebuild it again. And we see a lot of wrong architecture, which in the end then is just healed with energy, because you need to cool them down with air conditioning units to be able to be in a room like Prashant right now in Singapore. And this is just the completely wrong direction we're going into. And somehow we moved into this very crazy understanding of buildings that either it's just an investment product, you know, something you maybe can walk into, but it's just an investment product, or it is something where cities or even countries think they are modern if they just copy an architectural trend from somewhere else in the world. And we see that, I think, with more and more concern, that basically we don't skip the learning curve. We don't talk about what works and what doesn't work, and that we just follow these trends. And then where the trend started, now the new trend is emerging, like in the Northern Europe part, you know, starting to build with wood or even rammed earth and reduce glass facades and really try to minimize the solar impact into buildings. But if you look at that and you see what happens globally, this will be like 10, 20 years until that catches on globally, and we don't really have that time anymore. And that was the idea about the initiative, to raise more awareness and try to open the eyes of people, especially architects and engineers, to move away from this technical, yes, because we can. And this is, I think, where we see a lot of architecture in the world. It's always driven by this, yes, we can, and we can do it with more material, we can build higher, we can build more transparent, towards something where especially architects and engineers take their responsibility and advocate for that with their clients, to not follow a superficial trend, but really build something meaningful in its location.
Prashant, why do you think do we have this development in the last years in this direction? What is the reason for that, in this direction?
I think partly it's the speed of construction and predictability in the global world, right? So as Christine said, it's a global economy, and buildings are commodities for investments, particularly the speculative ones, where you have offices to let, and so as especially in the commercial buildings, as international firms were going into developing countries or wherever, they're bringing their what they understand as a good product in those markets, and people, that's on one side. On the other side, there's an aspiration, right, to kind of to work in an international setting. There is no doubt that that air conditioning helps increase productivity, in a sense that it's kind of it blocks everything off, and you can focus on things. And lastly, it's a nice way to cover up bad architecture, right? So you can design what you like, and then the mechanical engineering would come in and supply as much air conditioning as the bad design requires. I think it's this lack of common sense is what has created a world where about 30% of the world's energy is used in our buildings, and it's growing. I think, as Christine mentioned, we don't have much time. If you think about the opportunity, in developed countries, we are growing at about 1%, if at all, in terms of the churn of building stock per year. But in developing countries, this is a huge trend. It's like, they're almost doubling in terms of building stock. So, and I think, if we still think that by building sense now, and the emphasis is on sensible architecture today, we can stop this trend, particularly in developing countries where there's still a lot yet to come, right? So I think that is where I think our focus is. I think a lot of us have to play a role. I mean, it's not just on the architects, of course. There's a lot of finger pointing that goes on. We call it the circle of blame, if you like. Where if you ask the architects, they say the clients they don't request it. If you ask the clients, they say the investors don't want it. If you ask the investors, they say their clients, the tenants, are not asking for it. So you get this whole circle of blame. And I think if we can at least get one of those players to kind of say, no, actually, what, we don't really mind. As Christine said, if they can buckle the trend and kind of find a solution without making a big fuss, just common sense stuff. If you can get some credits, great. But even if the client doesn't want it, incorporating some basic principles in their practice, in their teaching, in their design, I think we can start to sneak this in and make a big difference in this way.
And maybe if I can connect to that, I think another big part of why we saw or see that kind of development is it's very industry driven. And this is where we as well, through that initiative, wants to kind of push architects and engineers to raise their voice. Because, if you look at building products, at AC units, for the companies, it's the most economic way is if you do this one fits all approach. If you don't have different products, different technologies for different regions in the world. And I think this is as well a big part of the development that went down the wrong direction at the moment. It's so massively industry driven, and this thrive to be modern and to have always the newest equipment, or that technical equipment can heal the architecture. And that is being announced to architect, that you have a very big freedom of design, because you don't have to worry about these things anymore. But I think what it as well takes away is the responsibility for architects in a certain sense, but even actually takes away a lot of freedom of design, because I think this is why someone studies to become an architect or engineer, because you want to solve a problem. You know, you want to connect with the location and the site, and I think this is as well a very strange development we've seen, that it is so industry driven, and this one fits all thing takes away the beauty as well of what we do and the potential buildings have, that you really look for an optimized solution instead of, you know, just do it like we see it everywhere, and then we just add technology, mechanical equipment, and then it will somehow work. I mean, this is not part and key of the profession.
I just wanted to add to that, Christine. Sorry, please go ahead.
No, fine. If you want to add.
That's always the problem.
I feel like it's not that nobody is doing it, right? I think there's a lot of good practice that is being done across the world. I think the idea was, when Christine and I met, is to show that there are good examples, good people, and connect them, create a network. An informal network is how we saw this, you know, as of concerned professionals in the building industry, not just architects, but, you know, who kind of feel a little bit alone, right? I think a bit frustrated, a little bit alone. And I think that there could be some way we could exchange those ideas and kind of hear solutions as to how somebody sneak this into their projects, or how are they doing something else? Because, you know, it's easy enough to find mainstream stuff. You know, I mean, to some extent, the industry actually is lining up to give you the best glass in the world, and they do all the detailing for you, right? It's when it comes to kind of finding a little bit more sensitive and contextually correct materials, you need a little bit of more, what's the right word, courage, right, to be able to take that chance, because you don't want to be experimenting on a client, right? So you need to kind of have a network where you can see, okay, I can see how that was done. Okay, mud architecture is not just for African villages, right? It can be brought into our cities, and it can be climatically appropriate, and it can be low cost, it can be quality assured, and it can be built fast. Right? I think I wanted to emphasize that this is not a romantic idea of going back to some vernacular, right? I think the world has changed, and it has changed in a lot of ways for the good, right? You know, cities in developing countries have created huge jobs, right? I think that's why people move to these places and live in the conditions they do, because it creates opportunities. But at the same time, there is this kind of divide between a romantic idea of what the village architecture would be, which is really not practical in today's dense, loud, urban, noisy, polluted environments, right? How do you bring that in? It's the challenge that Christine was talking about. And what a wonderful challenge for design. If, you know, design approaches should be looking at how do I solve today's context, right? And find that. So I think that's really where we feel super excited, that if you can bring this community together, where, you know, somebody's little sort of experience can help somebody else benefit from that and build confidence without too much of a formality, is how we saw this, right?
Yeah, I think confidence is good, and to show, you know, that there are examples, and this is what I meant, you know, by this very industry driven. If you look at industry magazines, you know, you just see buildings which are featuring basically the product or the technology and the solution. And what we, and this is why we initiated as well the initiative, but the award that goes with it, to show that there's an alternative architecture that works as well globally, and that building with mud or rammed earth is even something we see now happening in Germany. And we did, like 2 years, I think now ago, a workshop in India with 30 Indian architects. And that was one of the key feedbacks, is that they were very surprised that these conversations are happening in the northern part as well of the world, to look at alternative materials, to basically move back to wood or rammed earth or other kind of materials, because this is what they don't get through the mainstream, maybe let's say mainstream architectural media. And this is, I think, for architects, it's always very important to have a reference somewhere else to convince the client, and like Prashant said, to as well minimize the risk, you know, to always be the pioneer. I think there's some, they like that, but I think for most, it takes a lot of risk and a lot of responsibility. And there we want to create that support, you know, where they can say, look, this is done in Germany, in South America, maybe in North America. You know, let's do that here as well in Singapore, and try something else, and try to implement as well different design principles in our context.
So at least the modern architecture that you meant, like the big skyscrapers with a lot of glass, at least they learn from each other in the world. So at least the idea of buildings is not learning from each other, but they learn in a different direction. What can those architects from all around the globe learn from each other, even when the materials are not really there in Europe, like they are in Africa or in Asia? So what do they get also from those masterclasses that we offer? So how can we learn from each other in a way, even if it's not the next material for my next project?
Well, you know, in Germany, I think it doesn't translate well. So it's always one of my hobbies to translate German sayings into English. So one is, you know, I don't know, Prashant, we're all cooking with water, you know, is a German saying. And I think this is the big part. And I think what Prashant as well mentioned, everyone goes through the same struggle. You know, it's not that someone basically has all the solutions. It's everyone, you know, even for buildings where we would say, you know, that is really kind of what we would see as a sensible design and architecture. These architects had to go through a lot of struggle and fighting and research. And this is actually what we want to bring across in this initiative. Is there's no difference where you're located, you know, who your client is. You have opportunities to move it in the right direction, and the others have the same struggle. But you can learn from that, you can get inspired from that, and really maybe then have the courage to say, okay, I'll try it. And it's not always about doing the 100 or 200% perfect, you know, example. It is really about implementing things and starting to move in that direction, and especially have the conversation with a client in a different way. And I think this is for me, is one of the key things I think we've learned through all the conversations we had with this initiative. It doesn't matter, it's always the same topics, you know, it doesn't matter where the architect is located or the engineer. They all have the same struggles, they always have to do the same convincing, they always take the same risk. And I think this is what we need to bring across more, that this is a global community, and this is not about someone has it easier than the other. This is not the case.
Yeah, if I could, Felix, if I could answer that question in a slightly different, I think you were asking, what is there, you know, what can we bring to this in terms of learning, right? I mean, you're saying there's a lot of cross-pollination in the modern architectural sense, the contemporary stuff, but what is missing here in a sense? I think that you're absolutely right. I think there's a lot of learning or simplification of, especially in commercial buildings, right? Just glass, you know, there's some purity in that, and then it's easier to maintain. There's a lot of that, you know, making sure they don't fall down. So there's a lot that has happened and it's been brought across the world. But I think at the same time, somewhere down the line, I think, you know, the kind of conversations around passive design, low energy cooling and heating has been left out. You know, I think there was, I think we need to bring that back in. I think it's kind of there in the periphery, but I think if we can bring what are the mainstream approaches to passive design. When I say passive design, you know, simply shading and thermal control and how do you cool buildings a little bit more with without air conditioning, mixed mode ventilation. You know, is that really even possible today? You know, bringing that back in is one aspect. I think so. That's on the design side. Even on the materials, there's a lot of interesting innovation that is happening in the periphery again. You know, not just sort of dramatic stuff like using wood or mud, but just how do you reduce the amount of concrete, or even cement and steel in concrete can make a big difference. You know, without even making too much of a statement with the materials. And then finally, you know, two things actually, making architects realize that actually clients are under a lot of pressure to deliver, right? You know, especially commercial clients who are multinationals, they are getting a lot of pressure from their governments, from international press, from Paris Agreement and all of that, and rightly so. And I feel like the professional industry hasn't really picked it up internationally and said, look, actually, we can help you. You know, it's not just an engineering fix where you do some carbon offsets or find some clever photovoltaics roof. We can actually do this with our design, right? I think that's the bit. If we can bring, if we can help our professional colleagues to see that the clients can benefit from this monetarily in every other way, that could be quite good. And lastly, I come from the finance world. I work for the IFC, and I've seen that the finance sector has changed as well. And I feel like the design community isn't really engaged with that somehow. And I think if they can somehow get that across, not just in terms of the immediate kind of sort of bottom line of saving money, of course, but even the kind of sort of revenue side and increasing value and thinking long term and redundant assets and bringing that conversation into architecture can make them realize, actually, hey guys, this is moved on. This is not just about our portfolios looking like everybody else's and getting a few projects. We can actually do some good in being better connected with the global industries, like the finance and the clients. I think that could be an interesting way. So I think that's what Kristen and I wanted to bring. Of course, there's a technical aspects to the masterclass, but also some practical things of how do you kind of, what are the clients thinking? What is the financial sector thinking? All of that as well.
One aspect of the master classes will also be the topic of climate resilience. We have been hit in Germany in the last days very hard. So I guess in very many other emerging countries, this is a very, very important topic. So how can also then out of master classes maybe also the architects and engineers here in Germany learn from other countries, especially on this topic of climate adaptation?
Yeah, I think what we've seen now in Germany, it was not really a surprise that eventually something like that would happen, but I think this is a good example on when you see that if the infrastructure and the buildings are not designed for that, and if you don't have strategies on how to react to something like that, then you're helpless basically. And I think this is what we really can learn from other countries, especially in the global south, where they've been dealing with these impacts of climate change already for many, many years. It's about flooding, about extreme heat, about extreme storms. And I think this is as well a big part and a big argument that we have to move away from this global way of architecture to a very context-based architecture, and that we really have to look into the future. And I think this is a big challenge I think we all face globally, that laws and regulations, they're always based on past experiences. So they don't give you future-proofness, they basically just give you a baseline. And I think to as well see, and I think there are great examples as well globally on how can you build cities, where you need density. I mean, this is a very political topic in Germany, is density in cities, and people get always very anxious, and they feel like, it's going to be like Hong Kong or somewhere in Asia. But density, to a certain sense, is as well helping to reduce the heat island effect in cities, to bring greenery back, to basically unseal the soil. And I think this is something, especially in Germany or in Europe, we've done extensively, is because it's practical and it's organized, sealing things, sealing areas, and then the water cannot go anywhere. So I think there are a lot of aspects where we really maybe have to take a step back and really look at different countries who've been dealing with these extreme weather events for many, many years, or even always have, because they're always in a very hot and humid climate, and look what kind of original architecture was there. And we see so many buildings there. They've been like that for centuries sometimes, and they still work. And so I think this is the inspiration, not just one way. I think it always goes two ways. And I think we can learn a lot now as well from countries in the global south. And I think this is as well an important message to bring across. It's not this one way moving trends, telling people what to do. This is not what the initiative is about. It's really about learning from each other and really to cut the learning curve and try not to make the same mistakes everywhere in the world in different life cycles.
Okay, learning is a perfect word for moving over to the master classes. We have already next week the first real master class with Anne Heringer, who was the winner of the Building Sentinel Global Award in 2019. So she's very famous for buildings with rammed earth. So this will happen on 27th of July. We have in August to additional masterclasses planned, one with Marcelo Waschel, who is former desk officer of urban development for Latin America at MISEREOR, which we joined forces in the initiative with, and another one for low-tech design with Thomas Auer from Munich, managing director of Transolar and from the Technical University of Munich. So therefore, my colleague will put down in the chat the link to the Building Sense Now website. You said that it's about learning, so can anyone also join in and say, hey, I have knowledge that I want to share, so what would be the way to get engaged with Building Sense Now?
Yeah, I mean, we actually really... Sorry, Prashant, you go ahead.
No, just a quick absolutely, Felix. I think the whole idea of Building Sense Now is that it's really an informal kind of a group of like-minded people that want to help and exchange ideas. So, you know, obviously some of us have initiated it because we felt strongly about it, but we want this to be a joint thing. So, and the direction will be driven by the group, really. So if it's something that they feel they can bring to the table, as long as it fits in with the general idea of kind of helping others to see this, would be terrific. And the main focus is kind of, you know, within the constraints of climate change and those kind of aspects, right? I think there's a lot that, you know, we can help each other. We just want this to be at least somewhat defined in that space. So otherwise we'll get lost in this, I think, at least in the beginning, right? So I think that'll be good. I think the main other aspect is we don't want this to be a marketing exercise. This is a sort of a Chatham House sort of space, if you like, where we can exchange ideas. So it's not for DGMB or IFC to market it either. So this is just for us to exchange. If I can bring something of value from the financial sector, or you know, if Christine can bring ideas from her experience and her association, that'll be brilliant, right? So I think that's really where it's coming from. Sorry, Christine.
No, just basically what I wanted to say. Yeah, we're very happy if people get involved to lift as well the weight, because this is not an organization, it's really an initiative, and it's people-based. So you can sign up on the Building Sense Now website, being a supporter, and there, like Prashant said, it's not about marketing. So you cannot sign up with your firm, you can just sign up as a person, because this is what we believe is we need to activate people and we need to reach people, and not have like a strategic firm commitment, but really have people. And who wants to get involved, just send an email. I mean, this masterclass series, we now have the first speakers lined up, but the idea is really that if someone says, I have a good contribution, a positive example, something to say, I'm offering basically to do as well one masterclass, just let us know, or if you have any other ideas. So the initiative moves quicker if people get involved, if they spread the news in their network as well, and if they come up with ideas and how to get involved. So yeah, everyone is very invited to join in.
And just to add, it's not about, you know, the Europeans telling the rest of the world what to do either. So it's kind of a two-way exercise. I think there's a lot that can be learned in both directions, right? I think that's another important aspect.
Okay, so thank you very much. If anyone from the audience do have a question to Christine or Prashant, just use the questions in the module on the right-hand side at your screen. Yeah, the two of you, which of the aspects from the masterclass are you really looking forward to, because you personally want to learn on that aspect?
Well, I would say low tech, and I personally always like to listen to Ashok Lal, who's going to give 2 master classes about as well social cautious design in India. So I'm very interested in that, and we have an architect, I think, from North Africa that I think is an area we haven't been right now engaged. I think we've been, yeah, like India, you know, we went there for a workshop, so there's a small community already, but I'm very curious as well to learn from what's going on in Africa and South America, where I think Prashant already knows, but yeah.
No, absolutely. I think that I was just smiling because of the word low tech. It reminded me of when I was beginning my career, early stages. I met a very insightful mentor professor, if you like, and I said, which one is better, the high tech or the low tech? And he said, the sickle where you used to cut the rice stalk, is one of the highest technology of man, right? Sort of the shape of it and everything. So I think sometimes if you look at it, it's not about whether it's low or high tech in some way. I think I know what you mean, Christine. I think the point is to communicate that actually it is actually even more higher technology when you don't use energy, right? And you bring benefit without doing that. But I think, yeah, but I too, I'm most excited about how to make buildings sing, things that makes buildings much more sensitive and sensual and kind of more exciting places to be. And those are the kind of things that I feel like inspire architects, that influence the design, influence the form. So want to hear more people come through. And I also am particularly interested in things that can be brought to the mainstream. It's one thing if you can do something in a rural area with a lot of land. To do this in the central business district of Bombay is what will be really terrific. When you see good examples there, that's really what I think will also get us all excited, I think. So I think we'll get more and more as we go further. But I think some really good people lined up, Ashok and Anna and others would be terrific to hear.
Okay, as there are no questions been brought in by the audience, I really thank you for being here in the morning. I thank the audience for joining us here, and really looking forward to meet you again in one of the other masterclasses. So have a good day.
Thanks a lot, Felix.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks, Christine. Bye-bye.
Bye.